It's amazing how not lit up my face is when I don't have a bright white Excel sheet on my laptop.
Yeah, at the old apartment, I would have to like turn down my computer monitor as much as I could.
And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. Don't adjust those dials. You are not watching the strategy show on repeat. This just happens to be the exact same show. Before we get started, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer, and we are brought to you by OddsShopper. We're going to touch on everything over the next hour, and then on Live Before Lock, they're going to do it again. 2 straight hours worth of MLB content. If you're not prepared for this slate by the time we get to 7 o'clock, you were probably watching our competitors. Adam, how are you?
I'm good. Much happier for this show than the last show because I now have coffee, so everything's good.
I have had now multiple coffees today. I'm on to the Gatorades. Jordan seems to be mad at me because I had an orange Gatorade, and that's just apparently a garbage Gatorade to him. He's a Gatorade snob. Didn't know
I'm not sure
that
if he
was
was more offended by the color or by the lack of calories.
I don't know. You would have enjoyed my, well, I don't know if Jordan, if you would have enjoyed my lunch. Adam, I don't know if you would enjoy it either. I was in the hospital cafeteria, and their lunch special was basically like a trash bowl with, and normally that's going to be like a base of rice or something along those lines. You know, you had like taco meat and whatever. No, the base here was pierogies topped with kielbasa, cheese, bacon. I'm missing something else that was prevalent. Brussels sprouts, mushrooms. So the weirdest thing that I've ever eaten. Delicious.
I say it sounds really good. It's a lot of things that I like individually.
Yeah.
And I mean, like pierogies and kielbasa at least go together. I've never had them with like mushrooms and Brussels sprouts at the same time, but it all sounds good.
Yeah, I loved it. So my choices were, 5 pierogies as a base, which to me was immediately too many given the rest of the things that I was allowed to add to this because they didn't skimp on anything else. I was able to add 3 meats: chicken, kielbasa, or Swedish meatballs. I went with the kielbasa. Just felt like that flavor profile married together a little bit more. Yeah. They had roasted broccoli, Brussels sprouts, mushrooms, and something else that I knew I wasn't going to get. And then your typical toppings of like sour cream, cheese, and bacon. I was like, this is the weirdest thing I'm ever going to do, but I'm like really happy about it. And it was delicious.
I think that sounds really good. I don't know why Jordan's shaking his head no.
Jordan, not a pierogi guy?
Oh, you
are missing out. Do you like mashed potatoes? All right, so like in the easiest way to describe it would be like if you just stuffed an egg roll with mashed potatoes. It's not the same. It's more of a dough on the outside than an egg roll wrapper, but like that's the extent of it. Sauteed in butter, onions, fried if you want them to, like just simply deep fried ketchup.
I'm drawing a blank on it. It's mashed potatoes in a dumpling basically.
Yeah, that's probably a better comp too. The Rob Martin says potato ravioli. That's decent comp too, but like way
mashed
bigger
potatoes
than your
and
typical
cheese in a like dumpling or something like that is.
Yeah, just Google pierogies too. That'll probably get you there a lot faster than my stupid ass explanation. They were fantastic, absolutely fantastic across the board. But now that everybody knows what I did for lunch, Adam, what did you do for lunch?
Jalapeno chicken from Factor.
How are they going, by the way? I still haven't ordered them.
Good.
You're still ordering them?
Yeah, still ordering them. I've gone back and forth because the issue was like I was trying to mostly do like vegetarian ones, and like they're good, but I just get tired of it, and then I would end up ordering out and just kind of ruining my week. So I gave in and just started doing like regular like with meat, but like low calorie ones, and so like those are a lot easier for me to just stick to, and I still just do a lot better that way. So that's been kind of the sweet spot, but yeah, it's good.
All right. I need to make the push to just do that shit. So I'll hit you up for that referral code in the future. You ready to talk 8 games?
Yeah.
Let's do it. First game on the docket, Pirates and Cubs. And just like earlier today, it is a coin flip game. 4.1 runs for the Pirates, 4 for the Cubs. It's a 52% chance to win for Pittsburgh. JT Brubaker and Caleb Killian going for the Pirates and Cubs, respectively. No ownership going to Killian. 14% going to Brubaker. And like, I agree with it. I think he's the best budget option. I just don't think he's that much different than everybody else. But again, I'm not as big of a fan of the Cubs offense as the others. So maybe I should be a little bit more interested in Brubaker. Has anything changed for you since this morning?
No, I still agree with that. I think Brubaker makes sense. He's a decent strikeout pitcher. He's got the fifth highest strikeout percentage on this particular slate, and it's kind of you have the three guys at the top, then you have the massive drop off. Brubaker's at 22.3%. So at that price tag, that's solid. You have plenty of strikeouts going up against the Cubs as well. But I also agree with you where I don't really think there should be that big of a gap where you're getting 15% ownership going to Brubaker, but then only like 6% to Syndergaard, 7% to Lynn, 3% to Winkowski, 1% to Killian. I think Brubaker is the best of that group. He certainly has the best strikeout stuff, at least so far in the majors, but I don't really think he should be 3 times or more owned than every other cheap pitcher on the slate.
Yeah, that's sort of where I land. I think if you just have to rank them, I think he ranks first of all of those 7K or below guys. But I don't think the gap between these guys is as big as just like an ordinal ranking.
Yeah, exactly. It's a spot where like all of these guys clearly have flaws. For Brubaker, it's not strikeout percentage. For a lot of these other guys, it is. And when in doubt in DFS, I'm always going to prefer the guy that gets strikeouts. But within any given lineup, one of I think the easiest spots to save some ownership is getting away from the guy with the 4.3 xFIP and just going to a less popular guy that also isn't very good.
Anything for Killian here?
I still don't mind him at 1% owned. 5K is really cheap. I get that you don't really need the savings today. There's plenty of value, but there are also a lot of good bats to pay up for. And Killian is a good pitching prospect in a good matchup. I don't think I think he should be more than 1% owned.
That's fair.
I also think he probably will be more than 1% owned. But even if you call it 3 or 4%, I still think he's interesting at very low ownership.
Sure. Cubs, 4th in aggregate ownership, 4th in stack score, 4th in top stack percentage. I guess that's probably the place that we should start right now. They came out 5th in my top stack metric. I guess I like the Cubs a little bit more than I did earlier. You get, the 14% ownership on Brubaker is certainly helpful from a mild leverage perspective. Andrelton Simmons not in the Cubs starting lineup, so that improved the Cubs lineup that I had been taking a steaming dump on during the first show that we did today. How do you feel about that ownership? Does it make sense to you? Obviously, the value piece of this is what's pushing it. Wilson Contreras at 4,900. After that, most expensive guy in the Cubs lineup is 3,700.
Yeah, the value is nice, and you did get a little bit more left-handed heavy lineup than we were expecting. Not necessarily good lefties, but you have Ian Happ hitting 4th at 3,600. I really like that play individually. But Rafael Ortega is in the three hole at 2,200. Jonathan VR is hitting 6th at 3,200, and then you do have some right-handed power with Morel, Contreras, Wisdom. You prefer the lefties, but those guys are all at least decent hitters. So I do think this is a relatively strong Cubs lineup by Cubs lineup standards against Brubaker.
It does look good. Like it looks a lot better to me now than it did earlier today. So I think I understand the Cubs ownership. I don't really care. I think there are like 1 or 2 teams that really stand out today. Maybe we make that 3. And then I think there's like a group of like 6 more teams that you could make a real case for. And I don't really have much of a say either direction. The Pirates, on the other hand, are an even bigger value than the Cubs, significantly so, but not nearly the same sort of top stack odds. That should not be all that surprising. We have O'Neal Cruz is hitting 6th now, not leadoff like we were originally expecting. I still think he looks absolutely fantastic at the flat minimum as an outfielder / shortstop. You anticipating getting to the Pirates? They seem like okay, good value, I guess.
Yeah, and I also like that they're just not getting much ownership. Right now we have Sawinski as the highest owned hitter at 10%, Brian Reynolds at 10%. O'Neal Cruz is down to 7% now that we got Pittsburgh's lineup. That's crazy to me. I don't know if we just kind of end up being wrong there or if he really is only going to be like 7% owned. Obviously, you'd prefer him hitting leadoff, but if we get his ownership cut in half simply because he's hitting 6th, I actually prefer him hitting 6th in tournaments, and I'm still playing him in cash. I don't really care. It's one of the top hitting prospects in baseball. He's facing a good pitching prospect, but nothing. It's not like it's a proven pitcher or anything. Killian doesn't project to be particularly good at this stage of his career, and he's 2K flat with shortstop outfield eligibility. I still really like getting there. Brian Reynolds at 4K is good. Vogelbach's got power. I don't mind getting to this Pirates team here because one theme throughout the slate that we talked about a lot this morning, and I mentioned it on my tournament plays videos earlier too. Most of the good pitchers are facing good offenses. Most of the good offenses are facing good pitchers. So it kind of just relatively makes the Pirates look a little bit more appealing because normally you're able to just write off the Pirates saying like this is one of the worst offenses in baseball. But for most of the offenses that aren't bad today, you're like, yeah, well, they're also facing Max Fried or Logan Webb or Garrett Cole or something like that. So it does relatively make them, I think, a little bit easier to get to, especially when they're not that popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And we certainly have plenty of pay up pitching. So if you need to save some money, the second biggest top 17% odds of being the top value stack, second biggest top value rating on the slate. It's going to help you get to some expensive arms. That's for sure. Anything else you want to touch on here? Pirates or Cubs?
Nope.
All righty. And we're going to move it on to the Red Sox and Tigers. 5.3 run implied total for the Red Sox, 4.1 for the Tigers. Red Sox with the biggest implied total on the slate. This is my personal top stack for the day, at least as of right now. They are second in ownership. They are fifth in our stack score, behind the number one ranked Detroit Tigers on the opposite side. We got Josh Winkowski going for Boston, Alex Fado going for Detroit. Has anything changed for you for Winkowski or Fado? I'm guessing you're still in the same sort of spot where like these guys might show up in some lineups, but neither one of them is going to be getting any sort of real volume.
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly about Winkowski as I did Caleb Killian. He's a little bit more expensive, but same kind of idea where he's facing a really bad offense in Detroit. He's really cheap. I think he can go deeper into games than Killian as far as just like a leash goes. If Killian's pitching well, I think he still gets the hook before Winkowski does. But it's also probably just not totally necessary to get there. So like 3% ownership is probably low, especially when you consider that Brubaker for $700 more is getting 5 times the ownership. But it's not somebody that I expect to just be building around either because I don't think it's really going to be necessary.
When you look at the Red Sox today and the Tigers today, do you have an assumption of which of these teams you're going to get to more? Because the separation of our projected ownership and our stack score bouncing between the two is very interesting. But that's because the Tigers are apparently the top valued stack a quarter of the time.
Yeah, I mean, the Tigers pricing is really favorable. And you're talking about a matchup where, like if I have to just guess which side prevails more often, I'm leaning towards Winkowski for sure. But this is still a pitcher that isn't proven in the major leagues. He doesn't project to be anything special at this point. Doesn't project to be bad. Just, it's kind of just a guy. But you've got these really cheap prices on Detroit. I still, of course, would like to get to Boston a little bit more. And one thing that does stand out is that their ownership has come down a little bit since this morning. This morning, they were pretty much neck and neck with the Angels in ownership percentage. Now they're still popular, but not quite as popular as the Angels. For Detroit, though, Grossman, Reyes, and Baez are all pulling double-digit ownership, but you get a $2,100 Riley Green hitting fifth, another of the top hitting prospects in baseball, $2,100. He's certainly in that O'Neal Cruz category for me, where I think he should be a lot more expensive than he is, and I think he should be more popular than he is. He looks like a fantastic value individually. Grossman looks like a great value as well. So I think I probably just get to both teams, but I certainly don't. I think that I'm kind of surprised the Tigers aren't more popular given how cheap they are.
Yeah, same. Especially given the ownership going to the top 4 most expensive pitchers on today's slate too. It's not as if we've got 4 guys that are in like this 5,500 range that are just soaking it all up. Like you're already pretty clearly spending up at pitcher. I'm surprised that this crazy value Tigers team isn't pulling more. Like the only thing that I could read into that is that it's just like not necessary to even go that low.
Right. I think the issue is that even on the good teams that you're going to want to get to, the good offenses, there are some expensive players, whether if like with the Red Sox, Devers, Martinez, Bogarts are expensive, Story's expensive. With the Angels, of course, Trout and Ohtani are expensive. But then, Taylor Ward's 3,900, Jarren Duran's 3,400, Duffy's 2,500. Like the Angel stack as a whole is inexpensive outside of Trout and Ohtani. The Red Sox are a bit more expensive, but you still have $3,500 Verdugo, $3,400 Duran, $3,100 Cordero. It's not that difficult to stack these teams. And that's without even mentioning what you're doing with one-offs. Like you can throw in O'Neal Cruz as a one-off at 2K. That's going to open up salary. You can throw in Riley Green. That's going to open up salary. So I think it's just not going to be necessary to like full stack a cheap team or really use these cheap pitchers. That doesn't mean you can't. It just means that they're going to be relatively low owned compared to what you would expect when you see these prices.
Do you assume the negative leverage on the Red Sox are going to get you off of them a lot?
Probably not too much, because I still think that there are ways you can attack this team where you're being, at least relatively different. The only player like Rafael Devers is really pulling up the aggregate ownership. We have him projected for 27.5% ownership. I think he's also very obviously one of the best plays on the slate. That's not to say that you ever need to roster a 30% owned hitter in tournaments. Like it's pretty much always going to be perfectly fine to fade them, but you don't have to avoid him either. He's a great play. You just need to, pay attention to what you're doing with the rest of your lineup. But then the rest of Boston, for the most part, is between 10 and 18%. You have Franchi Cordero and Jackie Bradley Jr. below 10%. So overall, it's not like Boston's getting a crazy amount of ownership and it's that difficult to differentiate. And then on top of that, we've already talked about a couple of cheap pitchers that are not getting ownership. There's a couple of mid-range guys that aren't pulling that much ownership either that we'll talk about. So I don't think Boston top to bottom is getting enough ownership where I'm necessarily going to be like running the other direction.
Okay. It's just, this is one of those games where just looking at our top stack odds and like everything that comes out of the top stack tool, it's so weird to see twice as much ownership going to the Red Sox with the value piece of our stack score just driving the Tigers all the way to the top. I'm having trouble like reconciling all of that data together to figure out what the real issue here is. It just, maybe it's simply just Red Sox as a neutral, Tigers undervalued is probably like my first thought process, or at least Red Sox just slightly overvalued, Tigers undervalued, something in that neighborhood. But really weird game from a hitting perspective.
Yeah, and one other thing that's going to influence my Boston exposure most likely is just sort of what happens with the ownership on Toronto and the Angels as well. Right now, we're not projecting a lot of ownership to go to Toronto. I personally don't like their spot nearly as much as I like the Red Sox spot, but they're also getting like 60% of the ownership that Boston is, and we actually have them with a higher top stack percentage. Even if you adjust that down a little bit, the idea would be that like the way things look right now, I'm probably going to be getting to more Toronto at that ownership projection, which will cost me some Boston. But as we get closer to lock, if Boston keeps coming down a little bit and Toronto keeps going up a little bit, which has been the trend that we've seen since this morning, then like all things equal, I would certainly rather get to Boston against Faedo than Toronto against Lance Lynn.
Same. Anything else, Red Sox or Tigers?
No.
Bingo. Schedule for the rest of the night. Quite simple. MLB Live Before Lock coming up next at 6 p.m. Watch it. Watch it for a full hour. Take yourself all the way up to lock. Get all of the info, late scratches, etc. It'll all be available here for you. You don't even have to leave this stream. Just stay here. Free content. If you're watching this stream, I assume you're very interested in MLB DFS. You're in luck. Our player projections today are free. I don't know why you would want to watch this show and not at least look at the projections. So head to stokastic.com or look for a link in chat to check out our projections. Browse directly to the MLB player projections. Best in the industry, people. Rays and Yankees. Now we're talking pitching, and this has moved a bit. 3-run implied total for the Rays, 3.5 for the Yanks. Shane McClanahan, Garrett Cole, very clearly two of the best pitchers on the slate. Two of the most owned pitchers on the slate, two of the top three, in fact, at this moment. But Garrett Cole now is 16% owned more than Shane McClanahan. Cole coming in on DK at 10.5, 45% owned. McClanahan at 10.3, 29% owned. This has made it a little bit easier, in my opinion, to go to more Shane McClanahan. I don't have a huge separation between these two guys in this particular matchup, but I think the gap in ownership is getting a little aggressive.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of just view this differently depending on format. I think Cole does project as the best pitcher tonight. He has the best matchup. Tampa Bay is fine, but they have a 100 WRC plus, a 23% strikeout percentage. When you talk about Burns, he's going up against the Cardinals, who have the second best WRC plus in baseball and an 18.5% strikeout percentage. McClanahan's going up against the Yankees, who are the best overall offense in baseball and only have a 21.5% strikeout percentage. But that explains the median projections. It's not giving the full story in terms of range of outcomes. Shane McClanahan has the highest strikeout percentage on this slate at 35%. He's getting half the ownership of Garrett Cole on FanDuel, 34% to 18%. Granted, 34% to 10% on FanDuel. Granted, he is 9% or $900 more expensive. On DraftKings, where he's $200 less, you're getting a 45% to 29% discount. It's still not an ideal matchup for Cole. It's not a good matchup for Burns. It's not a good matchup for McClanahan. In tournaments, I like just getting to the lowest owned guy out of that group when I'm paying up.
It's just easier that way, right? Like if we're going to get this kind of gap, 45 to 29, and we haven't even talked about some of the other arms that I think should be owned as well. I mean, Burns is sort of splitting the difference between these two guys, which I think is just going to end up leaving McClanahan out in the cold. I want to have both of these guys a lot, but there's a decent chance that I just simply flip-flop their ownerships.
Yeah, in theory, that's what I would like to do. Obviously I haven't made lineups. I don't know if that's, how it's going to work out. Like if I don't know, the Pirates remain really low owned and I end up playing a lot of Pirates, then I probably just have a little bit more Garrett Cole than I'm expecting because I already have a low owned Pirates team, or, replace the Pirates with any other low owned team. But yeah, I do, when you're just talking between those three pitchers at the top, in situations like this, I do like the idea of just kind of flipping the ownership. Cole, I think, is the guy you go to in cash games, or at least one of the guys you go to in cash games. I fully expect to have him there. But in tournaments, Garrett Cole's just not going to beat Shane McClanahan often enough to be worth this gap in ownership. So unless you already just have contrarian lineups and you're just putting Garrett Cole in because he projects the best and it doesn't matter, that's one really easy spot, I think, to just sort of be a little bit different.
Anything else that we should touch on between Cole and McClanahan other than just play them because they're two of the best arms on the slate?
No, I mean, I think that's it. Again, I think Cole clearly has the better matchup. He's in Tropicana Field as well, which is a good place to pitch. But it's still, when you talk about McClanahan's upside, it's still a spot where I like getting there in tournaments.
Well, if we talk about bats, the Rays rank dead last in.
This Tampa lineup looks, I can't put my finger on who they don't have in, but it just looks bad.
I mean,
Vidal Brujan's batting fifth.
The lowest WRC plus via steamer is Kiermaier at 95, so it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. It's guys that don't normally play, at least. I mean, Brujan's normally towards the bottom of the order. Paredes doesn't normally play. Josh Lowe, I guess, is back. I assume it had been at AAA, and he's back. Rene Pinto doesn't normally play.
Yeah, a lot of strikeouts at the bottom between Lowe and Pinto, that's for sure. They are 16th in top stack, 16th in top value, 16th in ownership, and 16th in stack score. You go into the Rays on the opposite side of the Cole ownership?
I think it's difficult. I mean, anytime you're going up against a 45% owned pitcher, it's not a horrible idea in large field tournaments, but there's certainly other spots that I would rather get to here. They I think are difficult to get to for me. I would rather, even just amongst the teams that are facing good pitchers, I'd rather go to the Yankees against McClanahan than the Rays against Cole.
Same. Well, then let's talk about going to the Yankees because they are also equally as not owned across the board. Obviously, to me, it's pretty easy to want to one off some of these Yankees guys: Judge, Rizzo, Stanton, Donaldson, just all the guys with power. Really, you can buy home runs pretty easily at a low ownership rate from the Yanks. Do you anticipate stacking them up? Because obviously, you're getting the benefit of 30% of the lineups having McClanahan.
Yeah, I would like to get to the Yankees here, because again, it is a really tough spot against McClanahan. I like McClanahan in tournaments, but when the Yankees do well, they're a completely different level than every other offense in baseball, minus Atlanta, who is another team that we'll talk about on this slate that I'm interested in. But from a median standpoint, the Yankees aren't going to project very well because it's a very difficult matchup against McClanahan. But there's just so much power top to bottom in this lineup that if you just get a game where McClanahan is off and even the best pitchers are going to have a couple of those per season. The Yankees, it's not like they're just going to single and double him to death. They're going to just hit home run after home run. And even, they can do it late in the game after McClanahan comes out as well. Anytime a team like the Yankees that has as much power as they do is projected for 1.5% ownership, I'm going to like getting to them in tournaments.
Yeah, I'm going to happily have a little bit of the Yankees. I assume just, single bullets and stuff, but I'm cool with that. So just another weird game on this slate where it's either just heavy pitching or like obviously good offenses that are just being untouched. When the highest owned guy in the Yankees Rays game is 3% owned Gleyber Torres, like there's probably some hitters that you should be getting to a little bit more than not at all.
Right.
That's where we're at. Anything else for Rays and Yanks?
No, I think that's it.
All righty. Moving it along to Braves and Giants. 4.4 run implied total for the champs. 3.6 run implied total for the Giants. Max Fried and Logan Webb, which is basically like the homeless man's version of Rays Yankees. Fried pulling 20% ownership. Logan Webb at 8.5. I like Fried in a vacuum more than I like Logan Webb. I'm very interested in the low ownership to Webb. This is a spot where I don't really know what stand I'm going to make from a pitching perspective because Berrios is 2% owned. He's sort of like superseding Webb for me.
Right. I think that's very reasonable. I do think Webb, though, is someone that is going underowned here. Atlanta's got the highest ISO in baseball on their active roster. They also have the highest strikeout percentage at 26.1%. Webb has been better against right-handed hitters, as you would expect. 22.8% strikeout percentage against righties, 19.1% to lefties. He's held righties to just shy of a 100 expected ISO this year. And you're getting, very right-handed heavy lineup for Atlanta. So individually, Matt Olson, I think, looks very, very good for the Braves. But the rest of this lineup, it's sort of just, you wouldn't be surprised to see them hit home runs because that's what they do. But you also wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of strikeouts racked up here for Webb, who's not getting much ownership and who is relatively inexpensive. So this is another spot where, I like the Braves side of it just because they're not getting much ownership and they have so much power. But I like the Webb side too when he's getting 9%. Like Max Fried projects better than Webb, but he's also $1,100 more. He's getting basically twice the ownership. JT Brubaker, is getting more ownership, $1,500 less. Yu Darvish is getting twice the ownership at basically the same price point. So I agree with you on Berrios for what it's worth, and that's we'll talk about that when we get there. But Webb certainly in that category as well, where he doesn't project quite as well as the guys getting ownership. But this is one of, I think, the most obvious pitching spots where if you need to go a little bit off the beaten path at pitcher, Logan Webb gives you a way to do that without really sacrificing ownership in the mid-range, or sacrificing ceiling rather in the mid-range.
Yeah, my only real issue here is that he happens to be my third best positive leverage pitcher, but it's behind the guy that's slightly above him in Berrios, who's just bonkers owned today. And then I actually think Darvish is under owned, and it's just putting Webb in this weird spot where I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to capitalize on what I think is like a really good play because I'm just going to run out of different places to take the ownership from.
Yeah, I think so. Like I view Darvish. I mean, I guess I agree. Darvish is like, he certainly projects better than Webb, but I also don't think he should be twice as popular.
Yeah, well, we're going right back to the same decision point. I think the problem lies in the fact that there's too much ownership going to Garrett Cole and Corbin Burns, not to Yu Darvish. But
right, I think that's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if I just sort of end up getting more Darvish, more Webb, more Berrios.
Yeah, same. We'll see how much that actually matters. I can't remember if you said anything here. Like, do you have any thoughts on Fried? To me, he is like basically spot on the ownership he should have today.
Yeah, that seems pretty much correct to me. It's not a great matchup against San Francisco. They don't strike out a lot. They're a good offense, but Fried's also a really good pitcher. He actually has the fourth highest strikeout percentage on the slate. There's a huge drop off after McClanahan, Burns, and Cole. Then you get to Fried at 23%, but only a 4% walk percentage, typically an efficient pitcher, allowing 2/3 of a home run per 9 innings, 2.93 xFIP. Very, very good pitcher. Ownership is there. I don't really have a lean one way or the other on Fried.
Do you have a lean on the hitters? Because it doesn't appear that the public does. 12th in ownership for the Braves, 14th in ownership for the Giants. Braves do get to 8th in our top stack metric, but it appears that there is no ownership going to either side of this. I would happily try to buy at least a couple home runs out of the Atlanta power. This is another spot just similar to Yankees. And look, I like the Yankees bats, but I think the Braves are in a better spot facing Logan Webb than the Yankees are. So I guess I like the Braves.
Yeah, I like the Braves here. Basically, like I said, I like Webb because the Braves have a lot of strikeouts in their lineup. It's not hard to see the game where the Braves just strike out a lot against Logan Webb. He's a good pitcher. But at the same time, they have so much power in this lineup that they could do damage if Webb's not on top of his game. It's certainly a negative park shift for Webb as well. And like you said, the Braves are similar to the Yankees in that they're facing a good pitcher. The median outcome for them isn't great, but the upside is massive. And I don't think there's really any question that Webb is not the same caliber pitcher as McClanahan. So between the two, where neither team is getting much ownership at all, I would get to Atlanta before I get to the Yankees.
Okay. And that makes sense to me. And they're both equally unowned. Like Ronald Acuna being 5% owned as the highest owned Atlanta guy, like neither one of these teams are getting any sort of ownership. And, even if they get a little bit more ownership across the board, none of it is problematic ownership at all. It's easy to get to Atlanta if you really want to. Kind of makes me wish that Webb would get a little bit more ownership just to make that stack look more appealing.
Sure.
What about Giants bats? Are you going there against Fried? I just don't really see the value in it.
Yeah, that's a pretty difficult one for me. I mean, the Giants have been good this year, but you do run the pinch hit risk with guys like Slater, Flores, Ruff, which, again, not to double count it because good projections are going to project them for less at bats than if they weren't likely to get pinch hit for, but it does still sort of affect your top end outcome for that, for that team. Longoria at 3,100 looks okay, but Free's just a really good pitcher that, typically limits power, but also you just don't have the same sort of power in the Giants lineup as you do in like the Braves lineup or the Yankees lineup, which is why I prefer getting to them, because I think like when the Giants score 8 runs, it's still less likely to be super useful for DFS than when a team like the Braves or the Yankees score 8 runs, just in the way that they're likely to get those runs.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you have a favorite bat on the Giants side? I know I haven't asked for anything else, but just figured I would.
On the Giants side, probably Longoria, just because he's not getting pinch hit for and he's hitting 5th.
Wild. Evan Longoria now still the number 1 bat you can get for the Giants.
On the Brave side, without a doubt, Matt Olson.
Yeah, you get that lefty bat against Webb, certainly helpful.
Yeah,
anything else, Braves?
As well.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt. Anything else for the Braves and Giants?
No.
All right. Well, it is time then to talk about the sponsor of this show. That would be OddsShopper. I love doing this read. It's the easiest read for me to do because it is so obviously an asset to anybody that hears it, and it costs you absolutely nothing to use it. Whether you are able to bet on sports, if you're in a state where that works, fantastic. You can shop around for the best line that you could look for in MLB, NBA, NHL bets, golf as well. If you're not picking the best line when you're trying to put a bet in, you're only hurting yourself. It affects no one else other than giving more money to the sports books and less money to you. So please, at the very least, shop around. Do that all through OddsShopper. You could look at every single line. But the even bigger benefit that we have at OddsShopper is certainly when it comes to all of the props that are shown on the site, because all of our projection data drives into OddsShopper. So you don't even have to think about some of these props if you don't want to. We show the projection. We show your expected ROI, and we show your expected win percentage on these bets. And then you can shop around for lines as well. Now, they're all going to be based on the best line that you can get, so you should use it there. But you can see different options across the board for you. One-click betting. You can get right to it if you need to. Build out a betting card. We have calculators on the site to help you out. We have parlay builders. You can check out ARB opportunities. This all costs you nothing. You sign up. It's an email address that we get to see. That's fantastic for us. A little help. We can send out a little nudge like, hey, we got this going on if you want. But otherwise, it's nothing. Not a single cent will come out of your pocket for OddsShopper right now. You're not going to find a better deal anywhere else. So make sure you're using it. It's even great for DFS purposes to cross-reference some things that you think. Like if you want, thinking a guy's going to hit a home run, maybe he doesn't have the best home run prop for the day, and you're better off just simply using or betting the home run prop instead of using him in a DFS lineup. A lot of balance there too. So make sure you're checking out OddsShopper. Link would be in chat. 4 games to go. We're halfway there, Adam. Brewers and Cardinals next game up. Going for the Brew Crew, Corbin Burns, 4.3 run implied total for Milwaukee. Miles Mikolas coming off of a gem last time out, 3.3 run implied total for the Cardinals. Corbin Burns, 36% owned. Maybe a tad high for me right now. I'd like to reappropriate some of that to Berrios, Webb, or Darvish, whatever, but clearly one of the top pitching options today on the slate.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's a tough matchup. The Cardinals' active roster has an 18.5% strikeout percentage. They're second in the league in WRC+, but Corbin Burns is also really, really good. 32% strikeout percentage, 2.76 xFIP. And the matchup would just matter a little bit more if you had either better strikeout pitchers in the mid-range on this slate. There are good pitchers, but from a strikeout standpoint, they're not great. Or if you had better matchups for the other top-end pitchers. You know, Cole has a good strikeout matchup, but McClanahan doesn't. And so on an 8-game slate, the raw points for Burns, even in a less than ideal matchup, are still very appealing. But like you had said before, I certainly think you can make a case to kind of just like not get to as much of these expensive pitchers as a whole. I think that's fine. But Burns being the middle guy in terms of ownership seems correct to me.
All right, since we've already touched on all of these guys, and like Darvish is sort of in a different boat because of his price tag, I'm going to ask you right now, if you needed to save ownership somewhere and one of those pitchers needed to just go away for you, Cole, Burns, McClanahan, the guys that are pulling the heavy stuff at the top, is there one that stands out to you most that you would just you naturally think you're going to be well under on? Probably. I know you don't know that right now.
No, probably Burns. And my thinking is just Cole projects the best. McClanahan projects for the least ownership. So if I just had to burn one, I think it would be Burns, no pun intended, because he's kind of neither. He's the middle ground in everything.
Right. That's the way that I'm looking at it right now, where I'm sort of expecting one of these guys to just get taken out in place of Darvish, Webb, Berrios, and whatever to actually push forward. It's not going to be that's the guy to fade type comment. I just think it's going to happen naturally. I just don't have a real good feel of where it's going to happen.
Right. The way I'm thinking about it is if you told me that Corbin Burns was going to get less ownership than McClanahan's the easy one because he's getting middle ownership and he's the lowest projected. Garrett Cole's kind of going to have a role one way or the other just because he does project the best. But, if you told me he was 60% owned and the other two guys are 15 to 20, then I'm probably just getting rid of Garrett Cole and playing the other two. But assuming that Cole gets the most ownership, but not by a super crazy margin, and that, Burns and McClanahan are closer, whichever one is the middle one in terms of ownership is probably the one I'm going to want the least.
Mikolas today seems like it's really just not that kind of day.
It's pretty tough to get there. He's a good enough pitcher. It is a decent strikeout matchup against Milwaukee. But the issue with Mikolas is just when you look at the mid-range, Logan Webb has better strikeout upside. Jose Barrios has better strikeout upside. Mikolas is a bit cheaper at $7,800, but I just don't really think that $1,200 is going to make much of a difference off of Barrios or the $600 off of Webb. So it's tough to get there outside of lineups where just for whatever reason you have $7,800 left.
Let's talk bats. Cardinals basically unowned. Do you see any value in trying to go to a St. Louis stack against the Corbin Burns ownership?
If you get there, I don't hate it just because they are a good offense. The issue with St. Louis is that they don't have quite as much power or that probably is underselling it. They don't have as much power as the Yankees or the Braves. So, again, when you're getting 2% aggregate ownership going to the Yankees, 2% aggregate ownership going to the Braves, I would rather just be getting to those teams than the Cardinals, given that all three have difficult matchups. Also for St. Louis, no Tyler O'Neill in the lineup tonight. So you're losing one of the more powerful hitters in that lineup as well, which certainly doesn't help.
Brewers are 7th in ownership, 9th in stack score, 7th in top stack. To me, they're just a middle of the pack filler lineup. Mildly interesting just because Mikolas doesn't miss bats, but I don't necessarily think they're a priority. I just think they exist on this slate.
Yeah, they're pretty much middle of the road for me, especially on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I mentioned them in the tournament plays videos. We have them with the fifth highest top stack odds, getting 7% ownership. But even looking at that right now on FanDuel, they're basically the same top stack odds as like the Cubs, the Braves, the White Sox, and they're getting more ownership than all of those teams. So one really regardless of site, I think they're kind of just middle of the pack. Michaelis does a good job of limiting damage, but he does give up a lot of contact, and the Brewers do have power. So ownership, I think, is about where it should be. Milwaukee's just kind of a middle of the road offense.
Best Brewers bat?
Probably Tellez.
Okay. You get the lefty righty on Michaelis. Clearly, the most power in the lineup is either Tellez or Renfroe. So,
yeah, I actually don't mind. Where's he hitting? Yeah, he's hitting fifth. I actually don't mind Renfroe here, just because he is facing a pitcher that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. Michaelis has allowed a 171 expected ISO to righties this year, but he does also have a 22.5% strikeout percentage against righties. So you've seen, that number is higher in that split, as you would expect. But yeah, like Renfroe's fine too. I think Tellez is my favorite guy though.
Anything else? Brewers and Cards.
Nope.
White Sox hosting the Blue Jays. 4-run implied total for the Sox. 4.6 for the Blue Jays. Lance Lynn going for Chicago. Jose Barrios going for Toronto. I just don't get it. We're either going to be wrong aggressively on this ownership, or to me, he is very clearly the best GPP arm on the slate.
I agree. It also, I haven't seen it confirmed, but it's looking like he's going to have a really favorable pitcher's umpire as well, which normally you're not going to hear me talk about that because I think it's become one of the most overblown things in DFS content. But it certainly doesn't hurt when you're talking about a pitcher that's not projected to get much ownership at all. His strikeout numbers overall this year are down, but this is a pitcher that has a long track record of being a mid-20s strikeout guy. He's only at 20.5% this season, but it's also just been like some weird games throwing that off. You have like a 0 strikeout game, you have a 1 strikeout game mixed in. The White Sox haven't been a great offense this year. They're middle of the pack, 99 WRC plus, 20.8% strikeout percentage on their active roster. As long as the ownership's low, I like taking shots at Barrios. The weather is favorable for hitting here, it looks like, but either way, 9K with limited ownership going to Barrios. I like getting him here against the White Sox.
Yeah, it's just, if you're in a large field GPP, this is a very, very easy thing to do where you can get a couple multiples over the top of the field, and it doesn't really even affect the rest of what you need to do. Like, at 2%, let's just say you wanted to go crazy and you had 20% of him. He could get bombed, and like, you are not drawing dead to anything if you're 150, like if you're in a mini max or something along those lines. It's just so easy to get to him today. I don't think that he looks all that different than Fried or Webb, and he just happens to be getting none of the ownership.
Agreed.
It's wild. So wild. So I'm going to get there. Are you going to get the Lance Lynn at 5,800? 8% owned.
I mean, 8%'s fine. I wouldn't care if I get around there. He's not a bad pitcher. He threw 88 pitches last time out, so I think it's very fair to say he's underpriced. But it's also a really difficult matchup against the Jays, and as we've already alluded to, you don't really need the savings. You've got just so many cheap bats you can get to, whether it's a full stack, whether you're just using called up top prospects at minimum salary. We just got the Padres lineup, which includes CJ Abrams. So once again, a top prospect minimum salary that you can go to. It's just not a necessary price point, and it is a tough matchup. So if he ends up here or there, it's fine, but it's not something I'm going out of my way to get to on this slate.
Let's talk bats. Then let's start with the Blue Jays, who are the number 1 stack in our top stack model, 5th in ownership, 3rd in stack score. This seems like the place to go today.
Yeah, I
don't
totally get it. This is another one that, like, looking at the top stack tool, we have them with the highest top stack percentage and only 8% aggregate ownership, which is much less. It's half of Boston. It's like almost a third of the Angels. I don't understand how they're higher than those two teams. Like, it's favorable hitting weather, but you're talking about facing Lance Lynn versus facing Chris Bubich or Alex Faedo. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. I'm not sure if I will end up, getting to them quite as much as the top stack tool suggests, but
Yeah.
still 8% ownership for the Toronto Blue Jays is kind of always going to be somewhat appealing, regardless of who they're facing.
Yeah, I think that's sort of where I'm at now, where I don't necessarily think they're the top stack. They were third for me. But I do think that 8% ownership, given what we're seeing in some of the other spots, and the fact that like Vlad is the highest, like if Vlad is at 12%, I'm not all that concerned with the aggregate ownership for the Blue Jays, because the rest of the guys below him are not like Raimel Tapia, not like he's some sort of great hitter. He's below average. He's got no power. He's 4% owned. Like the Blue Jays stack itself is not going to be all that problematic to get to, the best that I can tell. So I like getting to Toronto here. I hope Lance Lynn actually pulls a little bit more ownership.
One other thing with Toronto, and again, it only matters to a limited extent when you're talking about hitters as good as Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, Hernandez with a ton of power. But Lynn has pretty much always just been lights out against right-handed hitters, especially as far as limiting power. Lefties at times give him trouble, but Raimel Tapia and Kevin Biggio are the only two lefties in this lineup. Neither of them hit for power.
No.
That's another reason why I just have a little bit more trouble thinking I really like Toronto here.
That's fair. Do you think you're going to get two White Sox bats here against Berrios?
Kind of, probably not too much. I still think Berrios is good. Tim Anderson expected back for the White Sox, solid, but he's also $5,500. Luis Robert and Jose Abreu were fine, but certainly prefer the Berrios side here.
Okay. Trying to get that Padres lineup in. I thought I was going to be able to get it done fast enough, but apparently that is not the case. So do you have anything else for the White Sox or the Blue Jays right now? Favorite Blue Jays bet? Let's do that.
Vlad.
I don't know why I even asked the question. I was just trying to I didn't think about what was about to come out of my mouth. I just knew that I wanted to buy myself like 30 more seconds. And the moment I said it, I was like, oh, you stupid asshole. You know what the answer is.
Also with regard to Berrios,
exactly. Also, go ahead.
I was kind of interested just because, like I said, he started out the season really slowly. He only has the 20.5% strikeout percentage so far this year. Last 30 days, which, kind of who cares, but last 5 starts, 28.6% strikeout percentage, 3.4% walk percentage. More in line with what you've gotten from Berrios throughout his career.
And that, to me, quite helpful on a day where no one appears to be touching this dude. And it's not like this is a 15-game slate. Like, it's 8. That's why it's really crazy to me.
Yep.
You're going to get guys that slip through the cracks on bigger
reiterate,
slates.
Like, I think relying heavily on anything Berrios has done this year when you're talking about a pitcher that has the track record he does and isn't old or anything is just like a massive mistake.
I agree. 2 more to go here, folks. We're about to talk about a big time offense, and that is going to be the Angels. 5.1 run implied total is the second biggest implied total on the slate. 3.8 run implied total for the Royals. It's Noah Syndergaard. It's Chris Bubic. Syndergaard pulling about 8% ownership. Bubic at 1. Floor is yours here. Are you getting to your main man, Noah Syndergaard? Are you getting to Chris Bubic? What's going to happen here for you?
I don't hate the ownership on Syndergaard, but again, I just don't think you need to get to that price point all that much. He doesn't have the same velocity that he used to coming back from these injuries. He does a good job still of limiting home runs, but only a 16.5% strikeout percentage. It is a good matchup as far as Kansas City being a below average offense, but I just don't think you really need to get that cheap. And the other thing that does concern me is that, and I say this every time Syndergaard pitches, he always runs the risk of, if he just gets unlucky on singles, ground ball singles, and they get through, guys are going to run on him. But Kansas City in particular, there's so much speed in this lineup. Merrifield, Benintendi, Witt at the top are going to run every chance they get. Taylor and Lopez at the bottom at the very least. So that's 5 guys that are basically just taking the next base if there's an open base in front of them. The middle of the order, not quite as much speed there, but still a scary spot there. So I think Syndergaard is underpriced, but I also just don't think he's going to really stand out on this particular slate.
Bubic?
I really hope not.
Okay.
He's underpriced, but underpriced in the sense that like starting pitchers should never really be that cheap. But he's been bad this year, like a 17% strikeout percentage, 13% walk percentage. He's one of Kansas City's better pitching prospects, but they seem intent on making him as bad as they possibly can. And it's not like it's an easy matchup here against the Angels. I would rather get Syndergaard than Bubic.
725 people in here, 100 likes on the dot, basically. Guys, hit the like button. I shouldn't have to ask this many times. And by this many times, I mean twice, once at the beginning and now 51 minutes later. Hit that thumbs up if you can. Let's run those likes up. I want to run that number. If we can get to 200, that'd be fantastic. I don't think you guys can do it. I don't think you're cut out for it. So, challenge accepted, maybe. Let's talk bats. Angels, number 1 in ownership, number 1 in stack score, 2nd in top stack, 4th in top value. Clearly, they look really good. A lot of this ownership is going to Mike Trout and Ohtani, but it's not like the rest of this lineup is unowned. What do you want to do with the Angels today?
Certainly not going to be upset about whatever you get to, because it is a really good spot against Bubic, and you have, I think, 3 of the best individual plays on the slate with Trout, Ward, and Ohtani. Trout and Ohtani, just obviously 2 of the best hitters in baseball. Taylor Ward has been one of the best hitters this season, but is also only $3,900. So you can assume quite a bit of regression from Taylor Ward and still have him project as a great option. So those 3 all really stand out. They're all also getting 20+% ownership. You have Tyler Wade at 2,100, who is projected for 16% ownership. He's somebody that was showing up in early cash builds for me just because he was so cheap on an offense that's likely to do well. So this is a team where I think it's gonna be kind of difficult to get away from, like if you're 5-man stacking them, it's gonna be kind of difficult to end up coming up with different builds. And so I think that chances are I end up using them more as like one-offs, 2-mans, 3-mans than full 5-mans. But individually, there are some of the best plays on the slate from this team.
If you're going to the Angels as a 5-man, may I suggest to you Jose Berrios?
Yeah, exactly.
Because those 2 should go together hand in hand right now. Are you stacking up the Royals 6th in ownership? I know you sort of like touched on them before with regards to Syndergaard, but 10th in our stack score. Are they overowned?
Well, I mean, based on my history, whenever Syndergaard pitches, I think it's safe to say I'll have Kansas City. But yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit overowned. But the thing that I like, and it hasn't worked with Syndergaard recently, but stolen bases are just so much easier to predict than home runs. All you need is these guys to get on base, and they're stealing. Merrifield's the only guy projected for double-digit ownership. Benintendi's next at 9%. I love Bobby Witt at $5,300, only projected for 7% ownership. I understand why he's not getting a ton of ownership. He is expensive, but he's got power. He's going to run. If he gets on base, he's going to run. So I really like Bobby Witt individually in tournaments.
I think Bobby Witt might be the most under-owned hitter today.
Yeah, like I just absolutely love Bobby Witt here.
It's either him or, at this rate, O'Neal Cruz. Anything else, Angels and Royals?
No.
Well, we're about to close this bad boy out. Padres and Diamondbacks. 4 run implied total for the Padres, 3.1 for the Diamondbacks. Yu Darvish, Zach Davies. No one rostering Davies. I'm just going to ask quickly, are you?
No.
Okay. Just making sure. I don't know if you're just going to tell me that Zach Davies is somehow incredible now. Yu Darvish, on the other hand, is going to be someone that I'm rostering. He is 23% owned at 8,100. Not like it's some crazy strikeout matchup, but I'm not all that worried about a Diamondbacks lineup other than the fact that they're trotting out lefty after lefty after lefty. I love Darvish because of his price today. To me, relative to salary, he is probably the best pitching option today. At least that's where I'm landing. What do you want to do with Darvish?
Roster him because of the salary. He's even more extreme than Berrios. Like you have the 20% strikeout percentage, 20.5% strikeout percentage from Darvish this year. But this is somebody that in previous years, typically flirts with around 30%. He's 30, he's almost 36. Like, it's perfectly reasonable to think that you're going to get some sort of a drop off from Darvish, but seeing somebody go from nearly 30% to about 20.5% in one season is pretty crazy. And it's likely to at least go up somewhat from this point forward. Arizona, not the worst offense, but there are certainly strikeouts in this lineup. No Kettle Marte for them, which is nice for Darvish. So I do like getting to Darvish here simply just because of the price tag.
I can't believe Yu Darvish has been in the majors for 10 years. You just said he was almost 36, and I did not realize that he's like basically my age. Anyway, I want to play all of the Darvish today. I expect him to be the guy that I'm most over the field on, which I don't know how that's going to end up shaking out for Berrios and Webb, but I just know that Darvish is going to be a guy that I'm heavy on no matter what. The price tag just doesn't make sense to me.
Agreed.
Bats in this one, we've got Padres coming in 10th in ownership, Diamondbacks coming in 11th. You see some value for the D-backs, but these teams seem to be in like the mid to lower mid pack. Are you seeing the Padres or Arizona differently?
No, not really. I mean, the Padres are really expensive, so that makes them pretty difficult to get to. I do think it's a decent spot against Davies, especially, considering how many good pitchers are on this slate. But you don't, obviously you don't have Tatis. Now you don't have Machado either after he was injured yesterday. Cronenworth is 6K, Profar is 5K, Voigt's up to 4,700. Outside of them, though, it is they're inexpensive outside of the 2, 3, 4 hitters. You do have Grisham leading off at 3,400. That adds a little bit of value. Eric Hosmer's cheap. Mazzara's 2K flat. Abrams is 2K flat. So I guess I do like them a little bit more than I did this morning just because of the lineup that they rolled out.
Yeah, I really like Trent Grisham in that one hole against Zach Davies. That's a lot of plate appearances. That's not a lot of salary. Easy guy to get to if you really need to. So anything on the Diamondback side really other than Varsho?
Not really. Varsho leading off at catcher is nice. Nothing else that really stands out to me, though.
Okay. Let's sum it all up. Favorite stacks for today?
Boston, if the ownership comes down a little bit. I like Atlanta a lot. Pittsburgh, from a value standpoint, is pretty appealing.
Favorite arms?
Berrios in tournaments. Also, I like Logan Webb quite a bit in tournaments if you need low ownership. I like getting to Darvish. And then at the top, I think Cole is the top cash guy. I like getting to McClanahan in tournaments as a pivot.
It's going to be a fascinating night tonight. Let's see if we got like a question or two in chat before we bounce on out of here. We have 2 minutes to go until we actually roll this one over to live before lock. So let's see what we've got in here. We don't really have any questions. Let me see if we got anything in our Discord. Guys, also, if you can, hit that like button one last time. We got to 180. Me shaming you guys appears to have worked. We are dangerously close to 200. So why not just make it 200? Nothing in the Discord right now. I do think it's fascinating that we got the Angels lineup at 5 something and not after lock.
I'm so glad Joe Madden doesn't have a job anymore.
That's a good point. Maybe I'll let's go see if he's in Hazleton right now. He would be like 15 minutes from me.
No Tyler Wade in the lineup, so ignore me mentioning him.
Maybe I'll run into him at the weed store later. Would be dope if I did. Pun intended too. And we got the 200 likes.
2,300 kind of takes the Tyler Wade spot.
That's a good point. Anything else here?
Nope.
There it is, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Stay right here. All 800 of you. Stay on this stream. Nothing's changing other than myself and Adam are out. 2 other people that I don't have in front of me are coming in. Looks like it's Eric and Greg for Live Before Lock. So watch that show, guys. It's fantastic. You should enjoy it. Peace.
So enthusiastic. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock, presented by OddsShopper. I'm Eric Lindquist. Good to be hanging out with you guys. It's 3:03 out here on the West Coast, 6:03 if you're not in make-believe land, like Jordan Klein, producer Jordan Klein, and myself are out here in California. Hopefully you're all doing well, enjoying Juneteenth. My dude Greg, though, he's going to be enjoying it a lot more once he gives us all of the MLB goods for today. How you doing, my dude?
Doing good. We had Father's Day yesterday. It was a nice weekend. We had cool weather on the East Coast. Really, so we went from 90-degree weather here to like in the 40s overnight. But other than that, nice day today. We just found out there's a little water park behind my house, like in the woods randomly, which is kind of weird. But yeah, everything's going good here.
You just found it?
My brother did, yeah.
He was scavenging out in the woods and he found a water park?
Yeah, he was going through it was like I guess like a nature trail hike, and it's not like a full like water park with slides and everything, but they've got like monkey bars and there are some slides with water and stuff like that, and then some other like sprinkler type stuff. Yeah. Just find.
What a find.
Exciting stuff.
I go for walks, I find trash behind my dumpster in California, and maybe somebody taking a nap.
Eric goes for walks and his car gets robbed, then it's never the same again.
It's literally that. It's 3 weeks later, man. 3 weeks, still trying to get glass cleaned up. Cut my hand, pulling bags out. We were in Huntington Beach for my father-in-law and everything. Yes, I'm not going to even get into it. Nobody gives a shit. You guys want to make some money here today? Hit that like button. Once again, as we get started, before we break down pitchers, we always go position by position on the show. Then we'll talk our stacks. Then, whatever we fancy. But anything that sticks out to you specifically on this slate that you want to be bringing up right from the get-go, Greg?
Just some Lance Lynn conversation, because he's really cheap on DraftKings, and I think there's a pretty good chance he's just kind of washed at this point. We talked about it at length for his first start of the season. We didn't know what to expect out of him. But ultimately, nobody played the Tigers in that spot, and it looks like the Blue Jays are going to go not all that highly owned today. One of my favorite stacks to get to once again today. But I think it's going to be a really interesting talking point. Just what do we make of Lance Lynn after sucking in the minor leagues, sucking his first start of the season, some pretty big red flags with his velocity down, but also him having a long track record of being a high-end starting pitcher and being in the Cy Young conversation. So I think where you land on Lance Lynn versus the Toronto Blue Jays, I think is going to impact a lot of lineups and tournaments today.
Yeah, it's going to be a big talking point for me too. If you guys saw my Prize Picks video over on OddsShopper channel, take a look at that. I talked about that pretty much at length. Lance Lynn, going to be shorting him at every stop here. Been pretty good against righties for his career, but you know what? 1.5 miles down in terms of velo in his first start compared to last season. That is a marked difference when it comes to Major League Baseball, especially when you're not a guy who has a 97, 98 mile per hour fastball. You go from 94 to 92.5. I've got some concerns, but let's start with some pitchers we have fewer concerns about, and they exist on the top end of the board. Let's go Garrett Cole, Corbin Burnes, the two 10K pitcher, Garrett Cole, Shane McClanahan, Corbin Burnes. Those are the three that I really want to be talking about. They're pulling by far the most ownership here at the top. Rank those 1, 2, 3 for me, Greg.
Corbin Burnes 1, Shane McClanahan 2, Garrett Cole 3. That is my current. That is current my ownership to them. It's also for DraftKings purposes in reverse order in terms of salary, and then also in terms of ownership, Cole is by far the most popular of the three, which also makes me like him a little bit less. I also just in general kind of like him less than those other two pitchers. And then over on FanDuel, it's a little bit different just because Garrett Cole is so much cheaper than those two guys. So you got Garrett Cole $500 cheaper than Corbin Burnes over on FanDuel and $900 cheaper than Shane McClanahan. So for FanDuel purposes, it's Burnes 1, Cole 2, and McClanahan 3.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say for FanDuel, I thought Cole went a little bit higher up the board, but McClanahan for me, that is going to be a major. I've been stacking up the Yankees, I think ad nauseum. I mean, just every single slate. Feel like I just bring them up routinely. Today, I'm kind of doing the opposite. Just give me all the Shane McClanahan. I'll take the highest K percentage, who's getting less ownership than your boy Corbin Burnes, than Garrett Cole, who's neither of our boys, or even Yankees fans, I feel like have a lukewarm relationship with him. He's very good, but I'm not going to play him more than I'm going to play McClanahan when you tell me that one is going to come in around 46% ownership. The other one's going to be around 31% ownership.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something also is I don't think any of these guys are necessarily bad plays, but there's also still just a pretty big ownership gap. And this is also why it's a different conversation, FanDuel compared to DraftKings. Although, on FanDuel also there is considerably more ownership going to Garrett Cole than the other guys. But just starting by talking about DraftKings, you've got Garrett Cole project for 46% ownership, 38% to Corbin Burns, 32% to Shane McClanahan. And if nothing else, let's say you think everything is equal between Garrett Cole and McClanahan, which I don't think is a crazy take. If you look at our top pitchers tool, we have 28.8% chance for Garrett Cole to be one of the top two pitchers on the slate, 25.7% for McClanahan. So we're splitting hairs. Very, very minimal difference between the two, but McClanahan for DraftKings purposes is $200 cheaper, and he's picking up 15% less ownership. So with that considered, and the fact that also, let's say McClanahan pitches really well and Garrett Cole also pitches okay, but maybe McClanahan gets the win bonus, I think that also adds a little tiny bit of extra leverage to McClanahan.
So if you're making 150 lineups today, I mean, if you're really looking to top out on one of these three pitchers, how high in terms of ownership are you looking to go? Is like Corbin Burns being number one for you on both? See, like a 65% kind of play? Like, where are you kind of looking at playing him?
No, so the other thing also about this slate is there are a lot of pitchers to like. There's a ton of viable pitching options. I mean, beyond just the top three, we've still got Yu Darvish at pitching at home against Arizona. That's a pretty favorable matchup. JT Brubaker, you and I've rostered him at times this year. He's 6,900 against the Cubs. If you want to take chances with Lance Lynn, I'm going to be more on the Toronto Blue Jays side. But if you want to have Lance Lynn in your player pool and just like, hey, sure, he sucked in his first start and he sucked in the minor leagues, but he's been good for years before this. And he's only 5,800. So I don't think he's a terrible guy to take a shot on in large field tournaments. Same goes for somebody like Logan Webb, who also has a tough matchup against the Braves offense, who's been really good, but they swing and miss a lot and they generate a lot of strikeouts. So there's reason to think there's upside there. So I don't have anybody owned in 60% of my lineups. I have Burns and McClanahan in a little over half my lineups. And then Garrett Cole, I have under 40%. So a little spread out a pitcher, although still Burns and McClanahan are definitely the top two guys, for me at least, to roster for DraftKings. And the FanDuel conversation would be a little bit different.
Yeah, I get that. I just thought it made a good talking point. It really just also depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, there's some people who will be playing aggressively one of those pitchers if they just land in a lot of lineups. I think if I were to aggressively play one, just the guy who's the lowest owned, Shane McClanahan. Once again, Corbin Burns, I like a little bit more as well. I like that Cole's third on both of our boards. Tampa Bay, this lineup against right-handed pitching, yeah, there's some guys that strike out above average, but that can also create some problems here for Cole. Also, him at home as opposed to on the road here right now, I don't know what to make of it. That Minnesota outing just has me thinking where maybe in Yankee Stadium, they're not going to call him out for doing something with sticky substance. This is such a like ancillary piece where it's like, I don't know, but goes to Tampa Bay, goes on the road, and maybe they're a little bit more stringent on him going and wiping his backside, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, the baseball's just been more lax with that this year. Like we still see the checks in between, but I think they're kind of being a little more lenient with what they let pitchers get away with. But I mean, it's neither here nor there. Cole has pitched well this year. It's just that Corbin Burns and Shane McClanahan, I just think are better pitchers. And then for DraftKings purposes, at least they're cheaper and they're lesser owned. So, I mean, all of that added together, like this isn't even about Garrett Cole and where I think he's at this year compared to last year or whatever, because I think he's good and is going to be fine going forward. But I still think Burns and McClanahan are better.
Chat is amazing. It's an amazing place.
Did you see the deleted message?
Yeah, so I clicked to look and see what it said, and I giggled. Don't say that in chat, but that's hilarious. I like you a lot, Pancho Villa.
Yeah, I do too.
All right, let's continue on. We're gonna work our way down.
Jordan over here is a communist deleting tweets, though. Doesn't believe in the First Amendment.
Don't think that's what the First Amendment does, Greg. But anyway, Max Fried, the next guy in terms of expensiveness, nice word used by me here. Happy Monday. Jose Barrios, who I just never like, but there's positive leverage and nobody wants to roster him today. Logan Webb against Atlanta. I mean, we're looking at three guys with positive leverage in this next tier of guys. I'm not going to call them pivots off the top, guys, because I find it impossible that I'm not going to have one of those three in every single lineup today for DraftKings purposes. But if you had to dip into this 9-8K tier, I guess you got to put Darvish in there too. Who are you going to land on the most on DraftKings?
Pretty clearly you Darvish for me, matchup against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And, there are certainly some concerns with you Darvish in terms of he hasn't been nearly as good this year from a strikeout perspective as he's been in other years, and not even close either. Like there's a huge drop off in you Darvish's strikeout stuff this year. He's at 20.5%, first career 29.3%. But this is also why the drop off is so crazy. He's never had a single season with a strikeout rate below 27%. He's at 20.5 this year. So just a massive, massive dip for him. He's 35 years old. The average fastball velocity is actually up a little bit from last year. Let me see where swing strike rate is at. The swing strike rate for Darvish, it's down, but it's not even a career low. And from 12.4% for his career to 11.4%, sure, you'd expect there to be a little bit less strikeouts, but not, not from like 30% to 20% or whatever. So I do think there's going to be a little bit of a rebound in the strikeout rate. The matchup is favorable enough against the Diamondbacks. They do have power, so it presents some risk. But even with that said, I think there's enough talent in Darvish that I do think he's going maybe a little bit overlooked here when you could get him at just 23% ownership. Because I do think that outside of the top three guys, he's by far the next best option.
Yeah, we're starting to see a number of things that make me feel like you Darvish is going to have some upside going forward. It's going to be a guy that I think, is probably at the tail end in terms of what we're going to see in terms of his K percentage, but just been getting by in terms of results. Doesn't even look like it's lucky anymore. Like you Darvish, I had concerns about starting off this season, and it just seems like he's kind of falling into a groove time to time. 455 expected slugging, that'll still get there, but I don't believe 20.5% is going to be his K percentage going forward. I do think it continues to creep up, not to the 29% career average, but much higher. So I'm with you in that regard. Max Fried, it's interesting because I think on OddsShopper, when I was going through OddsShopper for my process, trying to put together the prize picks videos that I do every single day, he was a guy who was sitting around 5.5 for a strikeout prop. I do like the over of that. I think that there's some nice cushion there against this Giants offense. They've been pretty good, top 10 in terms of WRC plus against right-handed pitching or against left-handed pitching for the season, but they still strike out around a 23.5% clip. You lose Jock Peterson left on left, which is, probably good in terms of run prevention with the kind of form we've seen from Jock Peterson this season. But is Max Fried somebody you're getting to any shares of? Because he has so much positive leverage, and he's really the only other high upside arm outside of Darvish that I think can compete with those other three arms at the top.
It's too expensive for me, and that applies to both FanDuel and DraftKings. And it's weird to me he's picking up as much ownership as he is on FanDuel. At 9,800 on FanDuel, Fried is 9.1% owned. McClanahan is 10.6%. That doesn't seem quite right to me. And then you talk about him over on DraftKings. Once again, you're paying $9,500 for him. He's picking up nearly 16% ownership. It's a tough matchup for him against the Giants. He's pitched, fairly well this year, but he's never been a high strikeout guy this year, 23.1% K rate, more or less in line with his career number at 23.9%. But it's, once again, just such a tough matchup for him against the Giants. And I just don't think he has nearly as much upside as pretty much anybody who's priced around him.
All right. Well, let's go to the bottom, scrape the barrel here. Hit that like button, y'all. So over 850 people you're talking baseball on a Monday. It doesn't get any better than that. This is awesome. Appreciate every single one of you. Yes, even you, Sean V, if you're watching, if you're lurking, I appreciate you too. Let's keep going down. Shapies. Miles Michaelis coming off of a massive outing, but I can't do that. JT Brubaker pulling by far the most ownership. Lance Lynn at the very bottom. You and I have our major concerns about him, but at least he's cheap. If there's going to be some upside, I just don't think I can do it. Who are you going to be landing on for a salary saver for DraftKings purposes the most today, Greg?
All right, so let's look at my builds right here, and it's JT Brubaker. So Brubaker, and it's not a real confident play, and I actually don't think there's that much need to go all that cheap at pitcher today. But I do have Brubaker in double-digit amount of lineups. I think that he's viable. Lance Lynn, to an extent, is viable. Like, if you absolutely needed to play somebody who's below 6K, I would say, sure, plug in Lance Lynn as an SP2 on DraftKings. But I don't feel great about it. It's not somebody I get to a whole bunch. But the one that I do get to the most here is JT Brubaker. Matchup against the Cubs is fairly decent. Also, when it comes to Brubaker, he's underperformed his underlying numbers. He has a 4.5 ERA, but a 3.83 expected ERA, and there's some strikeout upside there. 22 relative to his price anyway, right. 22.3%. So it's not like he's, a 30% strikeout rate guy or anything like that. But when you're looking at somebody who's this cheap as a punt play, a 22.3% strikeout rate is not terrible. So Brubaker, I think, is an acceptable play, but I don't think it's all that necessary to punt at pitchers. It's something that you found you have to do much today.
No, not really. And that's the Lance Lynn. I don't really need to do it. The bats that I want to get to aren't that cost prohibitive. You have offenses like Atlanta that are in a tough spot where I still like getting to them because of the current ownership we have on them. But you basically have Acuna and Riley at the top end, and then you have a lot of cheapies that you can surround with them. Same thing kind of with Boston. Even with Boston, you have so many ways with Duran, Cordero to trim some of that ownership, not Jackie Bradley, God forbid. But I just don't find it very difficult to get to the top stacks that I want to be playing today, or even just any of the stacks, even the Angels, same exact thing. You get so many cheapies surrounding Ward, Ohtani, Trout. Why do we need to be saving money here today? I don't really see it. No Ohtani in the lineup from the Angels, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. And another thing too is, and this is something that's also changed quite a bit as of late. Do you remember when DraftKings used to make the ace starting pitchers really expensive? Like, remember when Chris Sale was one of the best fantasy, maybe the best fantasy pitcher, and he would be 13K, 13.5 on some slates. Like he would get that old like James Harden price when his other star wasn't on the court with him. We just don't see that anymore. You roster Corbin Burns at $9,900. The most expensive pitcher on DK is Garrett Cole at $10,500. Even over on FanDuel, it's not quite the same as what they have over on DK, but the most expensive pitcher is Shane McClanahan at $11,200. They haven't made ace starting pitchers quite as expensive as they've been in the past. And it's just not that hard to stack high upside teams and just jam in a couple of expensive starting pitchers because these guys are $2,000 or so less expensive than they would have been a couple of years ago.
I clicked on the wrong thing. Ohtani's in the lineup. He was in that lineup that I pulled up, and that's why he didn't show up as I was going through the individual things. Ohtani is in the lineup. Don't at me on that.
Fake news, Eric.
Yeah, that's me. That's what I'm known for, is not being helpful.
You know what's going to happen now. You guys are going to look at Eric's lineups. 100% Shohei Ohtani. He's going to ship a GPP with it. It'll be a big online controversy.
Oh my God. If there was going to be an online controversy we're going to get in, might as well be today, right? Or at least like within the next week based off of yesterday, correct? Also, well done by you. Well done. Go follow him at Ehrenberg DFS. Go enjoy works of art. If you enjoy Twitter tweets that should be hung in the Louvre, in the virtual Louvre, that's Greg Ehrenberg. He's got you guys covered. I really don't have anything else crazy from a pitching perspective. It's pretty clear cut. Just kind of recapping, Corbin Burns, Greg's favorite. I'm going more McClanahan, but I absolutely love Burns as well. I think we both have Cole third. He's getting the most ownership. I get it. I totally get it. I'm just going to be trying to get away from it. We'll talk stacks here in a second, but anything else on the pitching board that really needs to be discussed?
So Caleb Killian is the top pitching prospect in the Cubs organization. He's a pretty favorable matchup against the Pirates. Nobody's getting to him. And I actually thought that as we got closer to lock, his projected ownership would go up a little bit, but he's still only projected for 1% ownership. And relative to just his price point, if you need to go like bare bone, like just super cheap a pitcher, I mean, I think he's worth being in more than 1% of lineups, and he may have an 8 ERA to this point. He's only pitched 9 innings. He does have an 8 ERA, but the underlying number is 3.1 expected ERA. He's walking a shit ton of guys. His walk rate is 17.1%. That's no good. But his minor league numbers, were good this year. And if you watched him pitch at all, he seems to have pretty good stuff. 95.5 average fastball velocity. And just to cite his minor league numbers this year, he had a 25.7% K rate, 8.7% walk rate in AAA, 2.51 ERA, 3.38 FIP. So Killian might kind of be decent. He has a good matchup against the Pirates. So if you're playing a chalky lineup and maybe need to differentiate or save money at pitcher, I don't think he's a terrible option. I have him in about 8% of my lineups right now, which that's 8x the field relative to his current projected ownership. Is he somebody you got to at all?
I have 3% of him, and I really didn't even know that I had 3% of him. So there you are. Fastball looks decent. Cutter looks like that's not really his best pitch, I don't think. I mean, we just have so little sample size. Yeah, we'll see. AAA, you're talking about it. He's got decent enough numbers. 2019 pick, 25 years old. Does that make sense math-wise? Oh, yeah, I guess it does. Senior in college. There you go. He's just a dude. I can't imagine that I'm going to make any kind of an aggressive stand with him today, especially with the top end of the pitcher board. But I guess I can get to, even like 5% of him. I'm not completely against it.
Yeah. So, and then once again, it's just because he's so cheap and is projected for 1% ownership over on DK. When it comes to FanDuel, also, there's not anybody getting to Caleb Killian also project. I mean, 1% is also just kind of our placeholder number. So it could be lower than that as well. But once again, if you look at him over on FanDuel, he's $6,500. So he's the second cheapest pitcher on the site. The only one who's cheaper is Chris Bubik, and he stinks. He's terrible. So I think there's almost some appeal to me in Killian just because, number one, he's unowned. And then number two, he's an unknown, right? He's probably not going to be good. Most pitching prospects don't pan out, but he's a positive matchup and he might be good. He's fairly well regarded. He was the key piece that the Cubs got from the Giants in the trade for Chris Bryant. So I think that he's worth some shots on in GPP. And I do prefer him to Lance Lynn a little bit.
Okay. Should we finish out with Lance Lynn? I can't really do it today. I had him off my board. Should I have any shares of Lance Lynn today?
On FanDuel, no. Not at 7K. On DraftKings, if you're playing a bunch of I don't have him in any of my lineups right now. I just reran them and I didn't get to any of Lance Lynn in it. But, he's $5,800. If somebody told me they were taking a shot on Lance Lynn because of his career history, I would say, okay, that's acceptable, but I'm currently not getting to him at all. I understand why people might want to play him as an SP2 on DraftKings, but there's so many concerns with him. The knee, the velocity being down, the fact that he sucked in the minor leagues. He sucked in his first big league start against the Tigers, struggling to generate swing and misses. So, and then I don't know how deep he's going to go into the game either. That was the other big thing that you and I had talked about in his last start against theTigers when he was, what was he, $6,500 on FanDuel, 6,000?
It was 55
okay.
on FanDuel.
So yeah. So he was 5,500 on FanDuel. And even then my thought process was like, I don't know if he's going deeper than 3 or 4 innings anyway. And I think he's going to be a little more stretched out today, but I'm not confident he throws 90 plus pitches or anything like that.
See, I was going back and forth just in terms of how I wanted to project him today because he threw 88 pitches, but he got tuned up. Like, yeah, that had more to do with it. Like, I bet if he was pitching well, he could have gone 95. I'm pretty sure 9,500 maybe, but he was getting completely squared up by Detroit. Only 1 barrel in that game, but it went a long way and 10 total hits. It did not look pretty. Velocity down, confirmed. You called that going into it. Yeah, that's the nice thing to be able to have a little bit of data to pull back on, but I'm not going to be going to there in any kind of a market way. My filler arc, $9.99 super chat. Appreciate you. Simply, I don't know baseball. That's all he said.
Here's what we have to do. Jordan, we are going to clip that. And then whenever anything happens, like Eric has something that goes really wayward, like let's say he loves a pitcher, gets lit up, then we post that on Twitter with that clip. So my fill arc, brilliant.
See, that's so cunning of you.
No, by my filler arc. He's thinking evil. He's thinking many steps ahead.
Oh my God. Hey guys, we're called Stokastic now. You should check out all of our great tools and content that we have over here. Our employees are so nice too, and they treat me so respectably and well that I can't even tell you on a day-to-day basis the smile that is on my face. Stokastic Plus tools and content, $18.95 weekly, but you can get 50% off 1 full month for 50% off because that's 50% off. I said it 3 times now. MLB Live. That's the promo code I was trying to think of. MLB Live, all caps, 1 word. It's on your screen. I'm serious though. I'm dead serious. They're okay here. I get, a thing of bread in the morning and it's nice. That's how they ration it out for me. But best tools and content, bar none here. MLB DFS. It is fully in gear. It is the only show in town, unless you're going to be hanging on the golf streets with Ben and myself tomorrow for PGA strategy, recapping the US Open and things of the sort. But check out the tools and content we have here for baseball. Also MMA, top fighters tool. For NASCAR, you've got the top drivers tool. Things that I don't even know how to play. And I just simply plug in the tools and can win some money You can join the party just by signing up. Use promo code MLB Live to get 50% off Stokastic Plus. Stop guessing, start winning, and join us on this side of the water today. All right, let's do it. We're talking stacks, and there are a lot of places to go. Even on this small slate, no massive implied totals. We don't have a Wrigley wind blowing out game. We don't have a Coors Field slate. We have a pretty awesome baseball slate, I think, for a Monday. I'm looking at Boston. I think that they're pretty clearly going to be a team to be getting to. Pretty clearly, Toronto is going to be a team to be getting to at the top end. But out of these really expensive stacks that are getting ownership, where are you kind of planning on going the most, Greg?
The Toronto Blue Jays, we have them as a very positively leveraged. Let me actually check to make sure the ownership hasn't changed. So on FanDuel, they're a little more popular, actually quite a bit more popular, project for 12.9% ownership. Over on DK, we still only have them at 8.3% ownership. I mentioned all the concerns about Lance Lynn before. And, even though on FanDuel, once again, we have them projected to pick up some ownership, DraftKings less, still a positively leveraged team. I'm not sure the field is going to do it just because, Lance Lynn was a Cy Young candidate last year. He's made one start at the big leagues. How many people are that keyed into the fact that his velocity was down significantly in his first start, that he gave up 10 runs in 10 innings when he made his minor league rehab starts? I don't know that people are that aware of how much he struggled. So I'm thinking the ownership is going to come in even lower than what's projected for Toronto. That aside, even if we just take these numbers at face value, I still think that Toronto would be among my favorite stacks, if not one of my least favorite. One of my most favorite. And I think that when it comes to Lance Lynn also, he's 35 years old. He's coming off knee surgery, late start to the year. I mentioned the struggles in the minor leagues. And the speculation you and I had going into his last start was, I think he might be throwing not quite as hard, but it's hard to know because there's no minor league velocity numbers. And then once I saw him start to throw some fastballs that were 89 miles per hour, 90 miles per hour, I was like, oh, this just might not be the same guy anymore. So I'm going to pick on Lance Lynn until I see something differently. Also, from a betting angle, the Blue Jays run total is 2.5 for the first 5 innings. So you're only dealing with Lance Lynn. I think that's also a pretty good, it's also plus money on the over 2.5. So that's a couple of things I like from this game. I like stacking the Blue Jays. I also like taking them over 2.5 runs in the first 5 innings at plus money.
I will piggyback on that. Over on Prize Picks, you've got Vlad Guerrero Jr. or Springer. You got 7 and 8 fantasy point respectively. I like the over 1.5 bases for Vlad. This is just not the same pitcher at the moment. I'm definitely in the same camp as you, where I was going through some of the velocity numbers, and that was kind of the thing we had talked about. It's not the same dude. It's not right now. Maybe he can get back up there. Maybe he can still kind of find a way to get it done. But as it stands right now, I am so shorting him with you. If I'm not going to be playing him on one side, definitely going to be stacking up him a lot on the other. Plus, in our stack score, it's not like people are playing this team right now. And maybe we're getting to lock and everybody's got him and we're just way off base with it. But as it stands right now, if you're going to give me the Blue Jays at 8% ownership share against Lance Lynn, who's gotten tuned up to Detroit and AAA teams in the last month, I think I'm going to be playing Toronto as well. So I love it. I also love Boston, a team that's garnering way more attention, but I think that there's enough pieces. If you avoid Duran or if you play Cordero, if you find some ways to stack up that team, I think you can get a little bit unique. Obviously, I do want to have Devers, his upside in that lineup. But are you planning on stacking up Boston? Is there anything that you're kind of planning to do with them? The only other team, I believe, with a 5+ implied run total on this slate.
I'm pretty significantly underweight to them, especially because a lot of their individual hitters are so expensive, are so popular and expensive also. But I would just rather pay up for other offenses that are picking up less ownership. So, we talk about baseball the same way a lot of the time, is that I don't think this is a bad spot for teams like the Boston Red Sox, the Los Angeles Angels, but they're both so popular today that it's hard for me to reason being anywhere around the field on these teams. 19% projected ownership for the Angels over on DK is the most negatively leveraged team. The Red Sox, 17% ownership as the second most negatively leveraged team over for FanDuel purposes. Kind of the same story, 20% ownership for the Angels, 17% for the Red Sox. These are the only two teams I really have massive ownership concerns with, and I prefer to be way underweight to them and just take my chances elsewhere. And the team that to me makes the most sense that we just talked about, the Toronto Blue Jays, who have very similar top stack odds on both DraftKings and FanDuel to the Red Sox and the Angels, but you're getting them at like 50% of the ownership. So that's where I'd much prefer to get my exposure in terms of paying up at offense.
All right. So outside of Toronto, who's the next offense if you're playing single entry, which I know you've been doing very keenly here of late? What would be the next team that you would be looking at rostering in that kind of a format?
Yeah, so Toronto's one for me. That's also the stack that I'm playing in single entry. It's kind of hard because I didn't think, because it's single entry, you're only playing one stack, so I didn't really think about.
So no, you have to have two because you have a wife and you can have her submit the lineups for you.
It could be a brother-in-law as well.
Okay,
but
there you go.
Yeah, you're not that clued into yesterday's controversy. There wasn't a wife involved.
Yeah, no.
Let's see. If I had to pick a second one, I don't know.
Who's your next favorite stack?
Just play.
Who's your next favorite stack? Who does number 2 work for?
So for this particular slate, one thing that kind of stands out about the Detroit Tigers, and not that I think their offense is good by any means at all, is they're so cheap, and there are pitchers that we like on the high end today. So you could roster, and this is more of a DraftKings play than a FanDuel play because we need to roster 2 pitchers on DK, but you could roster a 5-man Tiger stack with any 5 Tigers you want and play any pitchers you want with any 3 plug-in plays. So that to me is appealing about the Boston Red Sox. And then, I mean, we just have to talk about about Josh Winckowski and what we actually think of him as a pitcher. And it's hard to know. There's not really any kind of data on him. One thing that is interesting to me that stands out when it comes to him, and something that I like to rely on when I don't know anything about a pitcher, is what are Zips and Steamer projections, and they're terrible. Zips has him projected as a 5.15 ERA guy the rest of the year. Steamer has him at 4.64, and they also have him generating no strikeouts. 18.4% to this point is big league career, but once again, what can we really read into that? He's pitched a total of 8 big league innings, but he wasn't a massively high strikeout guy during his stints in the minor leagues. And Zips and Steamer have him as like a 16% K rate guy. So the overall underlying numbers here, at least in terms of projections, are not all that favorable on Winckowski. He was a 15th round pick coming out of the draft. He's 23 years old now. He did have some success in the minor leagues, but he was never a well-regarded prospect. So just because of the price tags on the Tigers, I think that they make sense to save salary with.
I suppose. I see our tools. I see the stack score. I see it there, and I'm still finding it very difficult to pull the trigger. 7% top stack percentage, still 4th here on this slate today. I mean, there aren't that many spots where you're giving up a whole lot, and Detroit just allows you to play every pitcher on planet Earth. So you could just rotate between McClanahan, Burns, and Cole a billion times and probably be in a decent enough spot. I'll get a little bit. I'm going to be underneath the 8.2% ownership share, I think, for that team specifically. Any other offenses kind of in this mid-range of guys that are in the stack percentage? Like for me, I'm getting to quite a bit of Atlanta. I think against Logan Webb, who has seen a little bit of regression from last season, but that's not too surprising. He had a phenomenal season last year. I'm looking at other guys or other teams like San Francisco against Max Fried. I know that doesn't seem super appealing, but it's 90 degrees down there in Atlanta. At least it's a decent game environment for hitting. 90 degrees, no wind to speak of. Any other of these offenses, these high upside type offenses that you're getting to?
It's tough because the Atlanta Braves, relative to their ownership, I think they're sensible. They're only projected for 2.6% ownership over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, we have the Braves only projected for 2.9% ownership. So relative to their probability of success in our top stacks tool, and that's something I rely on really heavily, it's hard for me to not consider the Braves. But at the same time, too, Logan Webb is not a pitcher I generally like to pick on because, number one, he's really good. But then number two, also, it's not like when he struggles, he has some massively favorable fantasy outlook for offenses against him. So think about a pitcher like Lucas Giolito that you and I stacked against the other day. When Giolito struggles, he's going to give up home runs. That's just his pitcher profile. Gives up a lot of fly balls, really high home run to fly ball rate. On the flip side with Logan Webb, when he pitches poorly, what are you going to get? He has a 57% ground ball rate. He's a 9.6% home run to fly ball rate. So it's hard for me to think that he's going to give up multiple home runs in a start. He's done it once this entire season, but overall for the year, in 13 starts, Logan Webb has allowed 5 home runs. So I don't really know what the realistic upside is going up against Logan Webb. So I do feel like I'm obligated to play them at least a little bit, the Braves, just because they rate out so favorably in the top stacks tool, but I don't love it.
All right. We got a question here from Mike and Drew Sports. Again, I know there's a lot of new MLB DFS people coming to join post NBA. NHL is obviously going to be done here too as well. When we say stacking teams, how many players are we talking? We're talking 5 for DraftKings purposes. We're talking 4 for FanDuel purposes. I'm primarily building 5-3-5-2s for DraftKings. I had done some 5-mans earlier where I was just running them 1-1-1 on the other side, and I'm finding some better results. And I like my lineups a little bit more doing the 5-2, 5-3 based on what the field's doing, which is running more flat 5-mans. So I've been doing that more. And then for FanDuel, pretty much exclusively 4-4, 4-3. But Greg, anything else to expand on for that?
No, run 5-man stacks on DraftKings, FanDuel, 4-man stack, and then usually a secondary 3-man stack to run it back. I don't run a ton of 4-4 stacks on FanDuel. I usually do 4-3 just because the pricing is so soft on FanDuel that it's just easy to fit a high upside bat as that final piece. So 4-3 is my most common lineup builds over for FanDuel purposes. And then DK 5-man stacks. And then I also saw somebody asked about the amount of salary that I'm willing to leave on the table. Is that a DraftKings or a FanDuel question? But for baseball, like I don't really care that much about salary in general. Like I'll leave thousands of dollars on the table.
Yeah, I usually put a cap of like 48K on. I change it depending on the slate, a lot of factors for things, but I just put it on almost as like just a habit. It's not even something that I really think about. I sometimes you just run it and it's naturally going to, because of the project, and depending on how much randomness you put in, you're going to get elevated up to the Acuñas, the Aaron Judges, the guys, the Rafael Devers at third base. You're going to have the expensive bats just naturally filter into your lineups. You don't really have to be worrying about it unless you were to have a team like Detroit that for some reason was facing the worst pitcher in the history of the world, which is something that is possible according to Steamer. So there you go. Where you get that team that's super, super cheap and they can go nuts and you can have 6-7K left on the table. That's great. But on a slate like today, I find it hard to believe that you're not going to have the optimal or like the top stacks end up with like 49K plus, simply because Corbin Burns, Shane McClanahan, Garrett Cole, you're paying the full freight to get up to these kind of guys. And I find it hard to believe that all 3 are going to be failing.
So, I mean, it depends on the stacks. And here for reference, I just sorted my lineups. 100 out of 150 lineups on DraftKings. The lineup that I left the most salary on the table with, it is a 5-man Tiger stack. The pitchers are Cole and McClanahan, and it leaves $2,700 in salary on the table. So like, I don't have an issue with leaving thousands of dollars on the table. The Tigers are so cheap. If you're making a 5-man stack of them, you're probably leaving salary on the table.
Yeah, you don't even have to set them in. Terry's saying the same thing in chat. It's not really something, again, I do it sometimes out of habit. Just because I'm so used to going in and putting in 49.6 or 49.7 in immediately for NBA sometimes. And I'm like, oh, I'll just put 48K, make sure that I'm not, leaving $2-3 on the table for different things, but you totally can. I have no problem with it, but it seems as though of late I've been playing so much Yankees that I'm pretty much using up my salary constantly, just with Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, obviously Garrett Cole today as well. Just expensive people that I want to get to and be playing above the field on most slates. But yes, best of luck to you with that. Hopefully that can help you. For all you new MLB DFSers, always got to remember that we have people stopping in of all different ranges, abilities, and want to always be able to help you guys out. So there we go. Let's continue on with stacks here. I like Arizona today, even against you, Darvish, a little bit. I feel like I play Arizona a little bit every single slate. And they have the second worst top stack percentage. So what do I know? But it's just kind of what it is. I think that we've seen enough hard contact for Darvish. I was looking at Kurt Suzuki catching and trying to get my Max Stassi out of lineup. So that was a Freudian slip. But you, Darvish, not necessarily the guy to go out of your way to go pick on here. But who else are we looking at getting to round out the stacks conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, some teams that I think we kind of eliminated. I don't like getting to the Yankees today. I don't like getting to the Rays. I don't like getting to the Cardinals against Corbin Burns. If we are going to take a chance on one of the on one of the super, super low owned stacks, I guess it's the Cardinals by default, just because, I guess it's the Diamondbacks by default, just because they have an easier matchup against you, Darvish. than the matchup against, Corbin Burns, Shane McClanahan, or Garrett Cole. But I don't particularly like Arizona either. My lineups, by the way, are skewed very heavily towards the Blue Jays for stacking purposes. And I mean, there's other offenses too, where the ownership is so spread out across the board. The only two, like I said, we only have two offenses that are really negatively leveraged today: the Boston Red Sox, the Los Angeles Angels. If you're not playing either of those offenses, you're playing a stack that's under-owned relative to what our data shows. The only other team that's slightly negatively leveraged is surprisingly actually the Kansas City Royals against Noah Syndergaard. The reason I say surprisingly is not because I don't think it's a good spot for Kansas City, but in basically every single Syndergaard start this year, we've seen him pick up a little bit of ownership and the offense against him not pick up ownership. And I kind of think this is a good spot for the Royals. This is a team with a lot of speed at the top of the order. They're capable of stealing bases. If somebody gets on base against Syndergaard, they're getting to second base. He does not hold runners well at all. But, once again, the ownership is there. I think people are kind of hip to that fact. So this is the fourth most popular offense on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, they are projected for 7.4% ownership. That makes them the fifth most popular offense. So the field is kind of getting there in a way that I think is reasonable. But yeah, I thought earlier in the day when I was just looking at the slate before we had tools updated, I thought I was going to end up being really high on the Royals, but the field kind of figured it out with Syndergaard.
Mark Curry, would you ever play Cole and McClanahan in the same lineup? Absolutely. No issue whatsoever.
Yeah, so for FanDuel purposes, things like the quality start bonus, the win bonus, so pitchers going deeper into the games, it's much more important on FanDuel. And on DraftKings, a little bit less so. Guys could have really good fantasy outings all the time without picking up the win bonus. But also, one thing that I will consider on FanDuel, and obviously you only play one pitcher on FanDuel, but something that does make me think of Shane McClanahan as a little bit more of a leverage play, bringing that win bonus into account. And something I brought up before when we were talking about pitchers is if McClanahan gets the win, that's a win that Garrett Cole does not get. It's worth 6 points on FanDuel, and the field is going to be very heavy on Garrett Cole today. So that's a little more reason to like the leverage you're getting on McClanahan in tournaments. And you just hope he doesn't get bombed on by the Yankees lineup, which is always possible to happen.
Definitely something that could happen. So Toronto, definitely in love with that. Both of us love that spot. Boston, I have a little bit of exposure to, where you lesser on the field there because it's just a tough spot. The Angels are the difficult one for me to kind of justify where they're crazy chalk. And you talked about Chris Bubich. He is terrible. He is awful. He is no good. He is very bad. It's 86 degrees. It is hot as balls outside here in good old Los Angeles, California. Anaheim, definitely going to be toastier than normal down there here. We're getting into the dog days of summer here, but I still can't do it at this kind of ownership, especially because everybody wants to be playing the same bats. Everybody wants to play Ward, who's super crazy popular. Everybody wants to play Trout and Ohtani. I just find it very difficult to land on this baseball team today. What do you plan to do with the Los Angeles Angels?
Yeah, same as the Red Sox. I'm really underweight to these two teams, and the hope is just that we get, like a Blue Jays outscores them and finishes with more runs. Like, that's the one thing I'm hoping for this slate is just don't have the top scoring team be the Red Sox or the Angels. There's a pretty good chance it happens. We've got it, according to our projections, about 25% of the time, either the Red Sox or the Angels are going to be the top scoring team. Maybe, right around there, 25% of the time. So yeah, that 25% of the time, I will certainly be shit out of luck. And Chris Bubich has absolutely sucked this year. He is an 8.36 ERA, a 6.73 expected ERA. His strikeout rate, low this year, 17.9%. His walk rate, high this year, 13.4%. Like, there's nothing here that's redeemable about Chris Bubich. He's been one of the worst pitchers in baseball. He's below replacement level. I just think that we've reached a breaking point in terms of what is an appropriate amount of exposure for the Angels offense. It's obviously a good spot. If you guys are playing the Angels, this is what I think is we could have a good discussion point about the Angels as a stack, is if somebody's stacking the Angels, how do they differentiate that stack? Because they're going to be really popular. It's clearly a good spot for them. My personal preference is to just be underweight to them, but I understand why people want to get to them because Bubich has been awful this year and has not shown he belongs at the big league level.
Matt Duffy's so bad. Like, why is Matt Duffy batting cleanup?
Because he is.
Thank you for all your analysis
Let's
today.
see.
Luis
So
Renifo,
Matt Duffy, when do you think is the last time, because I'm looking through, when do you think is the last time Matt Duffy scored more than 10 fantasy points?
I don't know, but I'm going to guess a long damn time. Let's go. I'm hands away from the computer. I have no idea. I'm going to go May 5th.
It is
just for the hell of it.
Scrolling.
You're still
May
not there.
28th.
Oh, okay.
Well,
So
yeah, May 28th, because he homered. No, he didn't homer that. He had 3 hits though. 4 hits against Kikuchi. So he scored 18 fantasy points that day. How many times overall this year do you think he scored more than 10 fantasy points?
4.
Once. That is the only time.
What?
Yeah. And not only
Dude.
that, here are his recent starts.
What are we doing here?
Recent starts for Matt Duffy. 0 for 4, 0 for 4, 0 for 4, 1 for 4 with a single. Here's a nice 2 for 3 with 2 singles for 6 fantasy points. 1 for 4, 1 for 4, 2 for 5. I mean, he's sucked this year. He's been really terrible.
Colin Richardson. Eric, top 3 plays on Prize Picks. We'll talk about that here in a second when we talk about OddsShopper. But God, Matt Duffy is so bad. Matt Duffy's due. Hilarious, Pancho Villa. Let me tell you, no, he's not. He's terrible. He needs to go away.
Are you going to put him in prison?
Oh, no.
I don't know. Is it a criminal offense to suck at baseball and hit cleanup? It should be.
He's making more money than any of us, and it's frustrating to think about that because generally you should be good at your job. You should be good at your job.
Duffy contract.
Matt Duffy triple dong Rin pack. I swear upon all that is good and righteous. If you talk that into existence, Chicago is going to be beat down, son. In a nice way. I love you. He's my best friend.
All right. So yeah, he's on a 1-year deal for $1.5 million right now.
Okay, good. Why wouldn't he be batting cleanup then? What are we doing?
Career
You can play anybody else other than Matt Duffy. Anybody else in this lineup is more justified to be batting cleanup.
By the way, this is close to the most money he's ever made in his career. He's not been somebody who's gotten paid well throughout his he's not quite poor, but 2014 he made $150,000, 2015 $500,000, 2016 $185,000. He's only had 2 years where he made over $1 million. You know, relative to a professional athlete, that's pretty low. The point being is, why bat him cleanup when nobody even wants to pay the guy?
Because you're the Los Angeles Angels.
And they have so many better hitters too.
I know. I'm floored every day. I feel like I've had this conversation a number of times about Matt Duffy this year, but it's whatever. All right. After that speech, he's obviously double donging. Yeah. You go ahead and roster Matt Duffy. Come back tomorrow. Let me know how that goes for you. I can answer for you. Not well. You know what will though? If you head to oddshopper.com, you sign up using your email, it will go well for you. Why? Because you have Alex Baker. Yes, Awesemo, still existing out in the world. Nothing has changed. He is still hanging out with us here at Stokastic. We've got the best data and tools from him, from Sean Zahn, from Steve Buzzard, everybody putting everything to work for you day in, day out in terms of expected ROI, expected win percentage, strikeout projections, home run projections, everything you could possibly want, and then cross-referencing expected win percentage to help you on a site like Prize Picks. If you're in California like me, my favorite place today being the over 5.5 strikeouts for Max Fried. Yeah, I'm still going to probably have a little bit of shares of that, but the 2 I really love, Vlad Guerrero over 1.5 total bases, putting that and pairing that with the home runs there. I think that that's a smash. And if you're going to play some chalk, why not have some chalk? Go ahead and take the Trout over 1.5 total bases there as well. Enjoy them. But looking at the board here for today, Greg, any props that stick out to you?
From Prize Picks or
Shopper,
in general?
Any of them, anything.
All right. So let me pull this up because I gave out one of them earlier. I have one thing I'm betting today is over 2.5 runs in the first 5 innings for the Toronto Blue Jays. As for other odds, I have to see what has changed. Is under 8.5 strikeouts for Garrett Cole still available? It is. So under 8.5 strikeouts for Cole, but this has really gotten juiced on the under relative to what it was earlier in the day. But even so, I think under 8.5 strikeouts for Cole makes some sense. We have him with the under project with a 66% win rate. You know, when it comes to Garrett Cole this year, he's been inconsistent. And one thing that does kind of stand out to me a little bit, the Yankees have been a little cautious of his pitch counts as of late. 70 and 92 pitches in his last 2 outings. Obviously, that somewhat caps the amount of strikeouts he can get in starts. But I just think more often than not, he's going to be under this 8.5 strikeout number. Like I said, we have the under hitting 66% of the time. So that's a bet that I could get behind. Although I don't feel quite as good about it as I did earlier in the day when it was not quite this juiced.
Oh man, people are just hilarious. Sleepy Joe, you can't say that either, but that is the funniest thing I've ever read.
Which thing?
How do I don't want to time him out because he made me laugh, but like I need to get rid of the comment. Sleepy Joe. No, we're gonna let it go. Okay.
Oh, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that.
Jordan Klein just out here allowing for
fluffing. That's not a what are we doing? That's not a big deal. You guys are a bunch of communists around here. Just let it ride. Let it ride.
You can't say that either. What are you
can't
doing?
Call somebody a fluffer?
No, the other thing. Don't call him a communist. He's a nice human. Sleepy Joe.
No. I said you.
Oh, me. Yeah.
You can't just center people for saying benign things in YouTube.
I'm not. That's not how the First Amendment works, though, people.
But fluffing is a respectable profession that people have been doing for years, and some people we work with. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Our forefathers. Well, no, technically forefathers. 1, 2, 3, 4. You line them up.
Yeah, and
that was a forefathers joke.
Yeah, they used to fluff each other.
Oh man, what a weird segue.
Think how upset that. Think how upset. What OMG?
End the stream.
So, but why? But look, OMG lol says his dad was a fluffer. Now think how upset and offended he would be that you guys have decided that this is not a respectable profession, that you guys are going to, because we think Matt Duffy would be better suited to be a fluffer. You think that should not be commented in YouTube chat. You've very much offended our friend OMG Lowells. You should apologize to him.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll never do it again. But what I will do right now, 6 minutes left in the show, is some home run calls. Yeah. Dong picks. Hot dong picks from Gregory Ehrenberg the first. I believe first of his name. Correct? Yes? No? You're not a junior. I feel like I would know that.
No, that's not a thing in Judaism.
I didn't think so. That's why I was just
I've never met somebody who was brought up Jewish that was a junior. So it's different. It's just different cultural things. So at least like culturally, the way that we do naming, it's either the middle name you're named after a relative or Hebrew name.
Man, we're learning all kinds of facts. Some of them more edgy than others. That one's fantastic. I love knowing that. But let's do this.
Yeah, do you know who I'm named after?
Call. Who are you named after?
Gregorius Ehrenberg. He was a world-renowned fluffer.
Give me your home run calls. Shut up.
Mike's
hitting
Trout.
a ball? Who's going to hit a ball a very long way? Okay, yeah, I'll take
probably Mike Trout. Probably Mike Trout. I'm not placing. I don't have any home run bets that I'm placing today. So in terms of bets, nobody. If I had to pick somebody who I would like to hit a home run the most today, it would be O'Neal Cruz.
Oh, look at you. Maybe that can be the position by position that we get out. No comments. Don't say anything about that, Greg. I know you want to position by position with the fluffer and the things and the words and whatever.
Can we just talk about him now? Actually, the price and the ownership on O'Neal Cruz is so ridiculous. He is the flat min on DraftKings at $2,000. He's projected for 7% ownership. You can play him in 4 spots. You could play him in all 3 of the outfield positions. He also has obviously shortstop eligibility. He's considered the best shortstop prospect in all of baseball. He's gigantic. He's 6'7". The only thing that's a little bit concerning to me when it comes to, but he's my most rostered hitter today. The only thing that's a little bit concerning to me when it comes to O'Neal Cruz is, have you seen his minor league numbers this year?
Yeah, he's batting like 232. I saw that earlier.
Yeah, he has not hit the ball all that well in the minor league. So that's something that's a little bit of a concern for me. The only thing that I'm kind of pulling away from that as, and maybe it's kind of confirmation bias because I just want to roster him as a really well-regarded prospect who's so cheap, but maybe he's just bored in the minor leagues. And we've seen this before with some hitters. We've seen this before. Do you remember when Gary Sanchez was the Yankees' top prospect and just didn't have good minor league numbers? He got called up to the big leagues and just started to crush. And everybody said he just wasn't focused on it. He didn't give a shit. He was bored. He knew that he was going to be at the big leagues at some point, and it was just hard for him to be motivated to play at that level. I'm kind of hoping that's the same sort of deal with O'Neal Cruz. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but he's a flat min on both FanDuel and DraftKings. It doesn't seem like he's all that popular right now. So I really, really like getting to him.
He can run too, from what I understand. Like he's actually going to steal some bags at the big league level too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally throwing away everything we've seen from in the minor leagues this year in the trash.
All right. Well, then that'll help out because, I mean, again, I know that let me find out where this was. 232. 9 homers here on the season, slashing 232, 336, 422. 9 homers, good. 11 stolen bases. There you go. So, there is the speed that goes along with it. He's 2K. Like, what do you want me to say? He's 2K, batting 6th for a bad baseball team, but he should improve it greatly. From the left side, that's going to be useful in that lineup. For sure. They've had some other guys. Oh, there it is. Finally, sex bots. I was thinking that they forgot about us. You said fluffer, and here they come. They come marching 2x2. Hurrah. Hurrah. Yeah. But you got to do this now for me. Position by position to round out the show. Catcher position. Go.
Let's see. I'm going back to pull up my lineups because I had O'Neal Cruz's minor league numbers pulled up in front of me.
Gabriel Moreno, Christian Vasquez for me. There you go.
Yeah, it's really hard to get away from Gabriel Moreno. Another guy, one of the top prospects in baseball, one of the top catching prospects. And he's still had a pretty cheap price despite finding success at the big league level. Only 2,400 on DraftKings. Obviously, we don't have to roster a catcher on FanDuel. But just because I'm rostering the Blue Jays so much, he's somebody that makes it into a lot of my lineups. But I would like him anyway.
Yeah, I just love the man. Hopefully he can get good here for year-long purposes. But Vlad, that shouldn't surprise anybody. Franchi Cordero, I said I'm going to try to make that a thing today. Let's make that happen, please. Then just a smattering of dudes. Who do you get the most at first base?
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Yeah. By pretty wide margin. This is going to be the case, by the way, when we're going. It's all Blue Jays guys for me.
Oh, there you go. Trevor Story for me. Next one. I think a lot of people are going to be going that direction. Always feels weird talking about contrarian play. Brendan Donovan there, batting second here, going Edmund him. I do think against Milwaukee or against Corbin Burns, your boy, I'm still going to get to a lefty or two. I don't want to do it too much, but it's still somebody that I'm trying to make a thing. Brendan Donovan hitting for actual average here at the big league level. This is pretty to see.
It is Jonathan VR for me, although I think a lot of that is because of some of the third base ownership I get to him also. But here's a spot where the Cubs don't really have a predominant second or third baseman that I'm dying to jam into my lineups. So Jonathan VR makes it into more of a lineups for that reason.
All right, we move along to hot corner, third base. Let's go.
So that is also VR for me. Well, actually, technically it's Devers, but I'm well underweight to the field on Devers. He's so popular on DraftKings. So he is the one that pops up in the most of my lineups, but he's 28% owned, and I'm not near that number.
Okay, that's fair. To the shortstop position.
O'Neal Cruz.
God, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. 2K flat, good. Nobody's playing him, or not nearly as many people are playing him as should play him. Bo Bichette, let's go yard, though. That would be fun, too. Bobby Witt got a lot of lineups. I will say Kansas City, a team that's pretty sneaky, makes for some good one-offs. You're going to have some of those guys running amok if they get on base. So Bobby Witt, let's go. Let's make things happen. Let's continue doing what you're doing of late. To the outfield, round out the show for us, Greg.
Yeah, so if you have the salary to pay up for Mike Trout and the rest of your lineup isn't all that popular, I think Mike Trout is by far the best guy to pay up for. The matchup against Chris Bubich is great. By the way, if you're somebody who plays cash games, you're playing Mike Trout in cash. Yes. He's 4 homers in his last 4 games. He's seemingly homers every single night right now. The matchup couldn't be better. He's the best player overall in baseball. He's healthy right now, which is something we haven't seen all that much of in the last couple of years. So Mike Trout, if you have the ability to pay up and you don't have an uber chalky lineup, that would be the answer for me. Looking at some other guys, O'Neal Cruz also has outfield eligibility, so I land with a lot of him in the outfield. Jack Sawinski, who homered 3 times yesterday,
sure did,
is very cheap, and I don't think he's going to be particularly good as a big league hitter. But we've seen power upside even before the 3-homer game. He's hit 11 homers on the year. He remains really cheap on FanDuel and DraftKings, so he's a sensible source of salary savings. But then beyond that, it's just Blue Jays guys for me. George Springer, Teoscar Hernandez, Raimel Tapia, all of them pretty highly owned for me. All guys I'm overweight to. And Teoscar Hernandez and Tapia are both pretty low owned today as well.
All right. Well, that's going to do it here for us, everybody. Hit that like button, subscribe button. You guys want to hang out with us some more? We'll be on tomorrow. Just get ready. Every single day, MLB. It's going to be a little Groundhog's Day-ish, but we keep it fresh. We keep it original here with the help of Jordan Klein behind the virtual glass. Just flexing, soft flexing the Kobe Bryant signed jersey in the background, because why wouldn't he? It's how he lives his life. But Greg, as we get to lock here, any final words for the people?
Ryan wants to know what I'm eating for dinner, and I believe my sister-in-law made shredded chicken that I'm going to make some burritos out of.
Alex Baker came by to say, Jesus, you guys are totally jinxing Trout, and now Duffy's going to go crazy. I hope not, boss man, but you could definitely blame me. You could definitely blame Greg if that ends up happening. But let's get on out of here. He's Greg Ehrenberg. He has said some funny things today. I'm Eric. I'm not repeating them. We'll see you guys later.
Matt Dovey hits 2 homers.
I will not.
I'll get a job as a flopper.